Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm making this recording mostly just to check my timing and make sure that I can finish in the right amount of time for the presentation. But also, I'll be sharing this recording. So if anyone wants to check back and maybe you missed something or you want to refresh something, you'll have access to this later. So anyway, hi, I'm Courtney Gumson, and today I'm going to be talking about executive functioning in the classroom, specifically practical strategies that hopefully you can take home with you today. So just so you know who's talking to you, so I'm originally from the US, and I have a master's in social work, but I've actually been teaching for the past 11 years. And so this is going to bring lots of practical teaching experience, I hope, to this presentation. I noticed a lot of need for executive functioning skills in my students throughout my whole teaching career. So that's what led me to decide to transition out of teaching. And I started a coaching business for executive functioning and ADHD. So here's a little overview of what we're going to talk about today. So firstly, I'm going to talk about what executive functions are and why we can't just leave learning them up to chance. And also we're going to look at why these executive functioning struggles show up. And finally, we're going to look at some strategies that you can use right in the classroom. So some tools, and hopefully you have something to bring home with you and start next week. All right, so what are executive functions anyway? Maybe some of you have heard of executive functions before. Maybe some of you are not so familiar with what that means. So I just want us all to be on the same page. So I like to use an analogy that executive functions are like the air traffic control tower of your brain. So I want you to picture your students' brains or anyone's brain as being a busy airport. I know we all recently went on a holiday, so a lot of you were in busy airports recently. So you can have that image very clearly in your mind. So in an airport, you have planes that are taking off, you have planes that are landing, you have planes that are circling around, taxiing, a lot going on. And the air traffic control, just like the executive functions in your brain, is controlling all of the chaos, making sure that everyone arrives safely, making sure that that planes are leaving and arriving on time. Sometimes that doesn't always work out, but the same thing with the executive functions in your brain. So they are controlling the thoughts and the actions and the emotions so that you're able to achieve your goals. And so where the part of your brain where the executive functions are formed is actually the last to develop. And so this is why it takes pretty much your whole lifetime to be developing these skills, and you continue to improve and develop over time. But just like math skills, reading skills, writing skills, or language skills, the executive functioning skills can also be learned and they can be practiced at any age. So there are 3 foundational executive functions. And these are kind of the building blocks for the more advanced executive functions. So more advanced would be like organizational skills and planning and time management or problem solving. So we need these foundational skills first in order to be able to do those more advanced things. So the first one is working memory. You've probably heard of short-term memory, long-term memory, but working memory is where we are using the information right now in the moment. It's where we store all that information. And so research has shown us that working memory is limited. There's only a certain amount of space in working memory. But we can use some tools to strengthen working memory. Like, for example, mnemonic devices is one type of tool that we can use to chunk information and make more use out of our working memory. So when students are still developing the working memory, then it might look like they are forgetting the steps of an activity. For example, if you give directions that have a lot of steps, they might remember the first step, but they're lost on the rest of the steps. You might see a student who doesn't follow directions. It doesn't matter how many times you repeat them. And then you also see students who are just losing everything, losing their homework, losing their worksheets, or they have a locker that looks like a disaster. These are all students who are still struggling with their working memory. So the second foundational executive function is flexible thinking. So just like our bodies need to be flexible, so do our minds. So we need to be able to look at things from many different angles. We need to be able, in order to be able to solve problems, we need to be able to look at things in different ways and be flexible to change. So students that are struggling with the flexible thinking, a lot of times they'll be seen as that stubborn student that just won't listen, won't follow directions, but like more when change is happening, they don't want something to change. They don't want to do something different. And then also they're going to be having a really hard time with planning, especially long-term projects to plan it out in advance. And a lot of them also suffer from something called time blindness, which is when they don't have a clear understanding of how long something will take, how much time they need to complete a task. So So this can really be a problem when a student needs to finish a test or finish homework. Like a lot of times they'll think like, oh, I can finish this homework in 10 minutes. I only have 5 math problems to do. But in reality, they need about an hour to finish this homework. And so it will end up either not being done, or the kid will be up really late at night trying to finish at the last minute. And the last foundational executive function is self-regulation. And this is your ability to control distractions. And a lot of times we think of this one when we think of students with ADHD. So you're going to have students who are shouting out answers instead of raising their hand, or they can't sit still at their desk, or maybe they're having some emotional outbursts. Like a lot of these students who have problems with self-control, like they might get into fights with other students, or just be crying during class, and you don't really know what caused it. And a lot of times this also happens in their head. So you're teaching, and the students looking at you like they're listening, but actually they're getting totally distracted by things going on in their mind. They're thinking about, oh, what's the next class? Oh, what did my friend tell me earlier? What am I going to have for lunch? Like they get too easily distracted by other things that are going on in their mind. All right, so we're going to do a warm up about the executive functions I was just talking about. So here on the board, there are 4 different situations that are very common in classrooms, 4 different problems, let's say, that you might have with a student. And I want you to think about I'll only ask you to choose one just for time purposes, but if you want to go back and look at the others, you can. But I want you to think about which executive function is this problem connected to, and then also how can we respond without judgment as teachers? So when we see this happening, how can we respond to it, but in a positive way, in a supportive way? All right. Okay, so moving on. So why do executive functions matter? So we know that they are an important part of development, right? But like, why should we worry about them as teachers in our classroom? Well, a big reason is that we have extremely high expectations of our students. We expect them to have these executive functions, right? We're always asking, why can't you be organized? Why can't you get your homework in on time? Why can't you just sit still? And we have these high expectations of students, but we don't necessarily practice these skills, right? We don't always teach them and we don't always practice them, but we still expect our students to have them. So this is one big reason that we need to start thinking about these executive functions and maybe spend more time on them in our classrooms. Um, also, a lot of studies have shown that having strong executive functions actually predicts learning. And apparently, executive functions predict learning even more than your IQ. And executive functions will also predict behavior in the classroom. When someone is dysregulated, with their executive functions, they're probably going to have some behavior problems in the class. And it's also going to affect your class flow, being able to keep moving through the class without having lots of interruptions. So finally, what's great is executive function skills or skill building is something that's teachable for all students. So it's actually a tier 1 intervention, if you're familiar with the 3-tier system of intervention. So that means that it's not only skills that you need to be teaching to those students with neurodiversity. All students can benefit from building these skills and developing these skills. And if we spend more time on it in tier 1, then you're going to have a lot less students needing more support in tier 2 and tier 3. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this chart, but there's a lot of research on here about how executive functions are important to just about every aspect of life. So your executive functions will affect your mental health, your physical health, and even as an adult, it's going to start affecting your job success and your relationships. So why are students having such a struggle with executive functions? Well, first of all, we need to think about safety first. So if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Safety is on the bottom. It's one of the first needs that we have. So if we don't feel safe in the classroom, if the classroom environment isn't predictable to us and it causes stress and anxiety, then it's going to be very hard to learn. Going back to working memory, those stresses and anxieties basically block your working memory from functioning. It starts filling up those slots to the point that you can't think anymore. So creating a predictable environment, a clear routine in class can really help students feel safe and therefore strengthen their executive functions. Also, there is an amazing molecule called dopamine. And dopamine, I think a lot of people think of it as the happy molecule, but it's also the chemical in our brain that gives us motivation to do things. So dopamine actually drives doing. So if you find ways to have little dopamine kicks in your classroom, that's going to really help motivate your students to keep working and keep striving to do better and keep up the effort and motivation. And we need to also make sure that we're not just telling students what to do, but also modeling for them. So I will talk more about this a little later. Just telling students to organize or to do your work without actually modeling it sometimes just isn't enough. I have a very good example of this. Unfortunately, with my last class, we were using these bins to organize all their papers from the different subjects in the class. This is a third grade classroom. And I gave them folders to keep for each subject that was labeled for them to file away all of their worksheets and things like that. And little did I know that just giving them the folders and the place to store it, it was not enough. So because I didn't model for them what staying organized looked like, most of their boxes ended up being a complete mess until we would spend maybe an entire class period trying to like reorganize all their papers and straighten them out. And some of them are crumpled or folded, and it was just a big mess. So going back, I would definitely do this differently and do a lot more modeling. And I think it would go much smoother and also teach students those skills, like how to be organized. All right, so one more game. So here we have on one side some classroom tools. So these are some things that we can do, like actions as teachers that we can do in the classroom, some tools that we can give students. And on the other side are some executive functioning skills. So what I want to do is I want to match the classroom tool to the executive functioning skill. So, of course, there's more than one right answer for a lot of these. Don't worry too much. But let's just start thinking about how these tools that we give students actually help them build these skills. So, for example, the last one, color coding folders and worksheets. This actually, using different colors for different subjects or different purposes can actually create an encoding in your brain that about the purpose and how to organize. So this is a great tool for learning organization, especially for younger students. But I mean, come on, even adults could benefit from color coding. I think a lot of people do that as adults in different parts of their house when they're trying to get organized. So take a look and try to match. All right, so I want to briefly talk about a webinar that I watched recently by Mitch Weathers. He created a tool for executive functions called Organize Binder, and it is actually a physical binder. I'll show you a picture of it in a moment. And he also wrote a book that's, I think it's called Executive Functions in the Classroom. So anyway, he kind of inspired this presentation today because he gave me a lot of really great ideas and inspiration. So he basically says that there's 3 keys to supporting executive functions in the classroom, and those are clarity, modeling, and routine. And all of these kind of they support each other, right? Like you need to model in order to have a routine. You need to be clear about how you're modeling. So they're all connected. And this is actually the binder that he created, and you can see it's color coded. There you go. Each section of the binder is to support different executive functions, and obviously a big one is organization here also, just by having the binder. And he has a whole routine that he goes through every day. So let's take a look. Here's routine, right? So this is the routine from Organized Binder. So he has a beginning routine, then he goes through an agenda, then they have a table of contents where they file away all of their different worksheets and things. And then there's another tool for organization. And he does all of these things before he actually starts teaching the class. And then after like maybe the last 2 minutes of the class, he has a concluding routine as well. And he basically follows the same routine, and he tells teachers to follow the same routine every day. And this basically helps you be more predictable. It's going to create that safety for students, right? And if you feel very safe and comfortable in an environment, you're more likely to start taking risks. So maybe you'll see students who never speak up in class actually participate when they start feeling safe. And when we're making those expectations very clear and there's consistency, then the class actually becomes like kind of like riding a bicycle where you don't have to think about it anymore once you've learned it. And you're going to have really smooth classes. And the best way to do this is to have consistency from classroom to classroom. I know it's really hard when you have many teachers, especially in international schools. You have Chinese teachers, you have foreign teachers from different places, and not everybody wants to be doing the same thing. But whenever you can, really try and get some more consistency, and that's going to be better for your students overall. And then about clarity, this is all about learning intentions and success criteria. So students need to be clear on what they need to be learning and how they can be successful in your class. Without having clarity on these things, then they don't know. There's no way for them to tell if they're doing the right thing, if they're going to be successful. And a lot of times we don't realize that we are maybe not so clear on these things. So there are some strategies for this. You can start with a visual start board in your class, just visually showing the agenda for the day. And I'll show some examples of this in a moment. This can help students make things more visible for the teacher and the students. So there's less questions about what's happening next. What should I be prepared for? What's going to happen tomorrow? What is the homework again? What materials should I have right now? Everything's right there on the board. And then also just about the way we give steps, give directions, to really try and simplify it as much as possible. Try not to give overly complicated directions, break things up into smaller steps. That can be very helpful in building clarity. So here's one example of a start board. I really like this one. It has kind of everything. You have the objective for the class that day. You have the agenda, so step by step what they're going to do through the class, what supplies they need to have prepared. And I kind of like they have the look ahead for the rest of the week. So you even have like the topics that they're going to have in the classes for the rest of the week, and the upcoming homework and deadlines on the board as well. It would be a great idea to have students actually physically write this down too, because a lot of times, even if it's there, they won't necessarily look at it. But if you spend time physically writing it down in a notebook, maybe you have a special notebook for this, then it'll create more clarity, right? Here's another example. This one's not filled in, but very similar to the other one. And this one's a digital one. What's great about the digital start board is that you can save them, and then you can look back on them in the future. So I could look back from the beginning of September and see what I was teaching in class, and you can even send it home to a student who is absent, or show them the next day, and they can see everything that was done that day. All right, and the last key is modeling. So remember that the routine that we talked about becomes clear when it's modeled, and without a model, we forfeit the clarity. So we need to think about modeling combined with the routine and clarity, right? It's important to show, not just say. One way we can do this is, with the organized binder, you can keep a class model, a binder, but you could do that also with any material that you use in class. Let's say you expect students to keep notes for your class. Like, you could have a class model for your notes where the teacher also writes down like the headlines and things like that they should be writing in their notes, or maybe copies the graphic organizers and fills it in, depending on what you're taking notes on. So here's actually the model binder. So if you're using the organized binder, you're making something similar to this. The students actually, during that beginning routine, they all do it together with the teacher, and they also file away all their worksheets and homework and quizzes, like all in one place in the binder, and it has to be in a certain order, and it's organized by date. And the same with the agenda. They write down the whole agenda every day so they can keep track of what they learned. They do kind of a warm up in the beginning, and then they do a reflection at the end of the class. And all of that's in this binder. And what's really nice is at the end of a unit, you can take everything in the binder, combine it together, and you have everything the student did for that unit. It's great for the student to feel very satisfied with themselves. I did all this amazing work. Look, it's all here. And you can send it home to parents, and parents see everything that they did, right? They can use the packets later if you have some kind of cumulative exam. It's a great idea. Anyway. And this is just showing how they're modeling writing the warm-up, actually. So this is when you first start the class. And I love this tool that this teacher has, that it has a camera on your hand and it broadcasts this TV. I think that's so cool. I wish one of my schools had that. I think I would use it all the time. But I mean, you don't need this tool. You could definitely do this on the board or on chart paper or something like that. But actually physically having the same page as the student, writing the same information with the students, like as they're doing it too, it's really going to leave nothing up to chance here. All the students know exactly what they should be doing, what they need to be doing. All right, and I know you're all thinking, oh, you're adding more things that I need to be doing to my class. Oh no, how am I ever going to have time for that? So the idea here is not to take time out of your class to add more things to your class or add another class or anything like that. It's really just about replacing that gray time, so that extra time where you're trying to get everyone settled, where you're repeating directions, where you're redirecting students to where they need to be, or re-explaining what you've already said. It's taking that time and instead making sure that things are more clear and students know exactly what the expectations are. They know they are working on their working memory, their flexible thinking, their organization and time management, right? All during your class. So really these extra things should only take maybe 5 minutes. I would say 8 minutes is even a stretch of your time. And more than likely you're spending that time in the beginning of your class, probably getting them ready to start and getting everyone ready to learn. So your gains here are smoother starts. You're going to have less tasks that are missing, especially if you keep them filed away somewhere in a very specific way and hold that expectation. And you're going to have happier parents, happier students, calmer transitions, all of that. So here we have some more tools. I think some of these are from earlier when we did the matching, like timers and weekly planners. I think we talked about that earlier, but for timers, it's really great for students, especially with that time blindness, to be able to have some visual of the passage of time. Any timer that like can show that time is moving. It's called a Pomodoro timer. This is a really good type of timer, and it will show you like how much time is left also, which is really helpful for students. And that's going to help them build those time management skills. For weekly planners, My last school actually didn't use weekly planners. That was the first school I worked at that didn't use them. And I can't say it went very well. It actually really frustrated me that we didn't have a planner. I just kind of accepted it after a while, which I regret. Um, but there's definitely research that shows that writing things down will help ingrain that information into your long-term memory and be it will be easier to bring to your working memory. So physically writing down what your homework is, your future assignments, especially for those long-term ones, is really important. So that's why I have analog versus digital. I know it seems old-fashioned not to use a digital planner, and if you can and it works, then that's fine. But I do think there's something to writing things down, physically writing things down. Um, Also, to-do lists and checklists are really great to use in class. This is, again, going to help with that working memory because there's never a question of what to do next because you have your checklist. And this is great for like those long writing assignments and reading activities, anything the students are going to be working independently on, especially any kind of checklist will be helpful. And then, oh yeah, so when you're doing activities that are building those executive functioning skills, like let's say you do like a warm up activity and reflection at the end of class, make sure to assign grades to that too. And I'm not talking about worrying about, oh, did they write in a full sentence and did they um, did they complete it to the degree that I expected to be completed or something like that. No, like, did they do it? Give them credit and give them a grade for it because it feels good to be building those skills. And that's especially for those students who are struggling academically. If they feel like they are doing something right, like they are at least improving their executive functioning, then they should be rewarded for that too. Give them that grade, that good grade. And that's going to encourage them to stay motivated to work on those academic things that maybe they're struggling with. And then the last one here is the structured movement and fidgets. So this is definitely something that you need to train students in because if you give any kind of fidget to a student, the first thing they're going to do is play with it like a toy. I mean, who wouldn't? And the same with movement breaks. If you don't structure it in a certain way, you're going to have chaos in your classroom. You have to have very strict rules around these and make sure to repeat the rules very often, have the students repeat the rules, have them posted somewhere, and always reinforce these rules. Make sure that you're following through with any of the consequences for breaking the rules. But they can be really helpful for those students who are having trouble with the self-regulation. All right, and I talked about dopamine earlier. Here's some ways to add some dopamine sparks to your lessons. And the first one about giving stamps and checks. I know it sounds really silly, especially for like those high school teachers, like, oh, my high school students don't want stamps. They don't need me to check off everything that they do. But even it doesn't matter what age you are, it's going to give you a little dopamine hit when someone gives you a stamp for doing something well. Even as adults, someone gives me a sticker. I mean, I'm not going to say no. It feels great to get a sticker. I mean, it's silly and funny, but it doesn't matter. It gives you that little bit of more of motivation. Like I'm going to keep trying this. This is fun. And the next thing about visible progress trackers. So this can be something that you do as a class. It can be something individual for each student, but especially when you have a long-term assignment with a lot of different components, a lot of different steps. Being able to see the progress that you've made so far can give you a lot of dopamine sparks. You're like, look, I've already finished this far. I can keep going. And the next one about choice. So anytime that you give students choice, it's going to give them a little shot of dopamine. I mean, I think a lot of teachers are already using choice boards and letting students complete assignments in a lot of different ways. And you can do that with pretty much anything. Even if you have like a warm up question, asking students about what they learned in the next class, you could have them, choose how they decide to show their answer. It can be a picture, it can be a diagram, it can be a comic that they draw, like really anything. And just having some choices in the class can be really helpful. Micro celebrations. I mean, when you have those on time starts in class, like the class has started and everyone is ready and you can just have the entire lesson for your class. I mean, that should definitely be celebrated. That should be celebrated every time, even if it's just like a little like cheer that you have with your class or just a round of applause, who knows. But like, don't forget about celebrating the little things, because they will always give you a little shot of dopamine. And then the last one about intentional brain breaks. So we talked a lot about working memory already, but when we're in a class, especially if it's a class full of information, kind of like this one, and I'm sure you're all feeling this a little bit right now, and this is why I tried to have little brain breaks in between with the games, but anyway, your brain gets overloaded. You get the cognitive overload after a while, and then you can't. Your working memory is full. You cannot take in more information, and instead you just start losing motivation. Maybe you start feeling a little lazy, like, oh, I'm done with this class. I can't listen anymore. And so it's really important to, as a teacher, to build in those brain breaks, especially if you start seeing like the dead eyes in your students, like get up and walk around, go get a drink of water, maybe throw on a funny video for a minute, just something to give them a little break, and just make sure that, again, it's structured so they know that the expectation is to come back and be ready to learn. All right. So I talked a lot, and we have a lot of tools that were mentioned today. So I hope there's at least one that will be useful for you, and you can choose one change that you could make to your class starting tomorrow. Tomorrow's Monday, so good time to start something new. And so what I want you to do now is just write down one change that you can start tomorrow. You just have to choose one. It can be anything that we talked about today, even if it's using a timer or, making sure that you do a warm up in the beginning of class to refresh their minds, anything like that. And then when you're finished writing, I want you to snap a photo for accountability. So this way, if you lose that slip of paper somewhere, most likely you're not going to lose the photo on your phone. And then you can look at it later, like on Monday. And then one last accountability thing is you can share with one other person. And that's also going to put it more than likely in your long-term memory, actually saying it out loud. And before we end today, I just want to briefly talk about my coaching in 60 seconds. So again, I'm an executive functioning and ADHD coach. I work mostly one-on-one with students. So what I do, it's a behavior intervention for those students that are really having a hard time with the executive functions we've been talking about. This is not academic tutoring. Even though we might look at their homework, I'm not teaching them how to do the homework. And it's not a mental health therapy. So even though some of these students might have ADHD, I'm not doing therapy for ADHD. And so what we are doing is working on building those executive functions. So we're working on the planning, the focus, the routines, and making sure that these students can be successful at school and at home, in their daily lives. So we're really translating the knowing, like I know I should do this, to actually doing it, and we do it together. All right, so I want to thank you for joining me today. At the end here, I have some resources. The first one is this is a website that has everything about ADHD if you're interested in more. I'm hoping to do another workshop specifically on ADHD in the future. The second one, Organized Binder, I talked a bunch about Mitch Weathers' system. Then we have a website for Pomodoro timers. And the last one, Goblin Tools, just has some really simple tools that are online and like to-do lists and things like that. It's actually great for adults as well. So thank you again. I hope everyone learned something today and see you next time.